Okay, well, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Well,
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Yoshua.
good morning, Rabbi. Good morning.
Given that we're going to talk about Tu B'Shvat tomorrow, which is Tu B'Shvat, related to the holiday, I think, is an important mitzvah, although it's not specifically listed as a mitzvah, and that is basically taking care of the environment. When Adam HaRishon was given a tour of Gan Eden by Kadosh Baruch Hu, so he gave him all the beautiful things in the garden, but it was his la'avda u'lashamra. The earth was given to man to work, but also to preserve, to protect. And in modern society today, we create an awful lot of junk, an awful lot of trash, which harms the environment. And the environment can be looked at not just in terms of the amount of garbage that we create, but also the air pollution. There's a lot of different topics related to the environment. I want to focus on recycling and what the halacha might have to say about recycling. Trash disposal is very, very expensive. Recycling perhaps provides a cost-effective way of dealing with trash. Ordinarily, disposal of trash, whether you bury it out at sea or you burn it or whatever way you have to get rid of trash, pollutes the atmosphere. Recycling can reduce the amount of pollutants released through normal waste disposal. We have limited resources, planet Earth, and at some point we may run out. And by recycling, we can remain on the planet, I guess, for much, much longer in a more effective way. What are the halachic obligations towards the environment, towards planet Earth? Are there any? Is there a mitzvah to preserve the Earth's resources? And thirdly, even if you're not convinced about the halachic imperatives or benefits of recycling, if the local laws, Dina de Malchusa Dina, requires recycling, does that mandate it as an obligation for us? So first of all, midrashically, for sure, we have an obligation to la'avda u'lashamra, to preserve the earth. That's in Brachus already. Halachically, it expands into a number of areas. We can't waste the resources that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. There's a whole, we'll get to the whole notion of baltashkis, of wasting or not taking care of the planet in a proper way. It's interesting, by the way, I should mention parenthetically, there is no halacha in the Shulchan Aruch called baltashkis, to waste resources. It's there in a different context. It's there in terms of bizui ochlin, not treating food in a proper way. You can't throw out leftover food if it can be given to somebody who needs it. You can't just throw out things. So under bizui ochlin, we have all the halachas of baltashkis. But as a halachic principle itself, we'll see where it comes from. With the Torah, there's a fellow in the Torah named Tuval Kayin. He was the innovator of dealing with metal, and he was called Tuval Kayin because unfortunately he used weapons in terms of warfare or to kill people. But he also used the metal technology for farming. He designed tools. And Rav Dessler explained the contradiction. On the one hand, he developed tools for murder. On the other hand, he developed tools for farming. And Rav Dessler explains that the resources that we have can be used for either good or for evil, for positive or destructive purposes. You can't use metal, for example, to cut the stones for the Beis Hamikdash or the Mizbeach, because that would invalidate, because again, a sword is used to take life. This takes us to another entire discussion, for example, concerning technology and concerning nuclear energy, for example. Nuclear energy is parv. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. It can be used to build bombs. It can be used to help in medical technology. It's what we do with the technology that we have. And our obligation, it would seem to be, that through recycling or through management of our resources, we are in effect fulfilling a biblical mandate, even though it's not specific. The notion of Baltashkis is to instill in us that which was provided to us. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us this wonderful planet, and if we don't take care of it and things go to waste, we may not have it that much longer. The Torah tells us that even during war, we shouldn't cut down fruit-bearing trees to use for various bulwarks or weapons or what have you. You're at war. But even in war, the Torah says, don't cut down fruit trees. And based on this comes the entire concept of Baltashkis. It's unnecessary for your goal. You might find other ways to accomplish what you need to accomplish, but don't cut down fruit-bearing trees. Based on that, the whole concept of Baltashkis. And the prohibition extends to other areas. For example, when a person is chas v'sholom a mourner, he's lost a relative, and he has to tear kriya. So the halakha, the Gemara tells us that if you tear kriya too far and you make too much of a rip in your garment, you're violating Baltashkis. Because again, in days gone by, people didn't have a half a dozen suits in their closet, and you'd have to sew up the tear afterwards because you didn't have another jacket to wear necessarily. So you can't rip it too far, because then you'd be ruining the garment completely. You tear it to express your grief, but you don't tear it to ruin the jacket. So that's another concept of Baltashkis. There are times, however, when you could cut down trees if it's causing damage to other trees and so forth. But the general rule is that Baltashkis is something that is done in a destructive fashion. So every time we throw out leftover food might potentially be a violation of Baltashkis if that food is edible. Now, again, we understand that the cost and effort of preserving leftover food might be greater than the benefit of preserving it. We understand that. And that might be a heter to throw out a half-eaten dinner. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who are hungry. Even in very wealthy communities, there are people who are going hungry. And leftover food can be used. This is a concept. The Mefarshim are go into great detail. There's a tremendous discussion, for example. It's just amazing. What do we do with tzitzis strings after they're worn and you want to replace them? This was a tashmishe mitzvah. What do you do with tzitzis strings that you don't need anymore? Or if your talis cotton got ripped and you want to get a new one, what do you do with the tzitzis strings? And there's a whole, if someone else could use them, there's a whole question about Baltashkis. About just throw it into the garbage. Some people suggest you use tzitzis strings for a bookmark, perhaps. or someone else could use it to make his tzitzis. It doesn't have to be the fanciest tzitzis in the world. But again, the conceptual notion of poskim arguing about leftover tzitzis strings tells you how important the notion is of conservation, of recycling things that we have. I remember, years ago, when I was a short period of time, I was in the active rabbinate, and there was one rabbi in town who was very, very conscious of waste, of ecology, if you will. And he tried to make a case that if all the kosher caterers would take their leftover food and donate it to a food bank or give it to people that were hungry, that will be the appropriate use of food that is left over after a wedding or bar mitzvah or the simcha. And furthermore, if a caterer would not give the leftover food away to those who could use it, they should lose their hashgacha. Very interesting concept, because the hashgacha doesn't only refer to the food itself being kosher, but it also refers to how you treat food and how you treat other people. Now, we have, fortunately, in Bergen County, we have a number of organizations that will recycle the food. And in certain cases, before you get the Sheva Brachos, it's already on somebody's table. The Shevis HaPlate, there are a number of organizations. In Teaneck, there's just an article in the paper about it recently. But this is very important. At any simcha, big catered affairs, there's tremendous amounts of food, perfectly good, edible food, that gets thrown into the garbage. There are organizations that will come in, because I understand that it takes time to package it and they'll come in, they'll package it, and they'll get rid of it for you. And they'll bring it to somebody's house who needs it, a person who's out of work, a person who's ill, whatever the case may be. There are people that could use, or even give it to the volunteer fire department. There are people that would appreciate and need this type of food, and throwing it out is an aveira. This is recycling on the highest level. On the highest level. The tzitzis recycling is obviously the model. Mefarshim contemporary poskim differ as to how much effort you have to do to preserve this leftover food, for example, or is it an obligation to prevent it from being destroyed? How much effort do you have to put into it? So these are ethical concerns that I think are halachic mandates, that if we have not just food, clothing, other things that are usable, that someone else could use, not only does it behoove us to make use of these things, but it's probably a halachic mandate to do so. Let's go back now to recycling specifically. All the plastic and all the metal objects that we have can be recycled. In some communities, such as Fair Law, we do recycle. In other communities, in Woodmere, for example, the town separates the stuff for you from your garbage. All right, different structure. But we have Dina de Malchus or Dina. If the law requires us to recycle, then the halacha requires us to recycle. And it applies to all different types of things. Not just things that benefit the government, but benefit Ben Adam Lachaveiro, as the Shach points out in Yeredeya. The Chassam Sofer says it's another category of Dina de Malchus or Dina, and he says that if the law, like recycling, benefits society as a whole, and it's an area that may not be specifically or directly addressed by the Torah, it is equally a mandate to follow that. If the purpose is to save money on waste disposal, that's not, now that might be considered a form of taxation. But clearly the major impetus is not saving money, but the environmental benefits.
Rabbi.
And even though recycling may not benefit a specific person, but the recycling will benefit society in general. Yeah.
It's interesting, you're emphasizing Dina de Malchuta Dina and, stuff like that. Every time I'm in Israel, I'm really amazed how what seems to me underused those huge recycling bins are in various neighborhoods. It's like people can't be bothered. And you would think, and it's not just in like Chiloni neighborhoods, it's other neighborhoods too. And you would think that if it's, halachic, they would be used more, perhaps.
Yeah. Again, people do what is the most convenient or easiest for them to do. And if it involves effort, then sometimes you need legislation to make sure they expend that effort. People by themselves, I mean, this is why we have laws. Otherwise, there'd be chaos. But you're right. And Dina de Malchusa Dina should not be necessary for someone to do what is right. But we don't live in a perfect world. And sometimes we need a little encouragement, either from a halakhic perspective or from a legal perspective. I mean, we know, for example, that we do this regarding shemos, for example. If we have Sfarim that are old, or a Sefer Torah that is old, or Divrei Torah written on a piece of paper, we don't throw it in the garbage. We put it in a box, a shemos box, or we bury it. So pursuing this to its logical conclusion, perhaps we could say that it's probably halakhically appropriate not to make too many copies of Torah materials, because they're going to wind up.
Hello, it's me.
So I think Baltashkis is being raised to a higher level when it comes to Divrei Torah or a Sefer Torah. There, most people tend to be a little bit more careful. Many places have shemos boxes for extra Xerox copies that you don't need, or things that are not being used anymore. And then eventually, we know at many levayos, it's all boxed up and buried to treat it with dignity. But the notion about Tashkis, even as extends to Kriya, and it goes even further. I mean, there are some halakhic practices. For example, when for the women who bake challah. So if you bake a large quantity of challah, you have to be mafresh challah. And if you take too big a piece to burn, that's baltashkis. So, and this is why, for example, there are some people who are very, very frum, and they're mafresh challah that they might buy from a non-Jew. And some posts can say that you shouldn't do that because that's baltashkis. There's even, and we talked a few weeks ago about the yahrzeit light. The yahrzeit light originally was lit in shul to help provide additional light in shuls. This is before the advent of electricity. But lighting an extra candle, which does not provide additional light, might be a violation of baltashkis, according to many authorities. So clearly, going back full circle now to Sefer Bereshis, Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us this wonderful planet, and in addition to giving Adam Arishon Gan Eden and giving mankind the planet, he also gave us instructions not only that we could use and benefit from the planet, but ulashamra, to protect it, to guard it. And part of this obligation, this mandate of guarding it, is taking care of the natural resources that we have and using them in a way that is most productive. And that means recycling. We don't want to pollute. we should recycle. There are two mandates. I mean, we have a separate shiur on pollution because there's air pollution, there's garbage pollution. The halakha talks about all these different things, but polluting the air, protecting the environment, recycling that which can be recycled that someone else can benefit from, especially in the area of food. I mean, other things, plastic and metal, this also preserves the environment because the amount of pollution thrown into the air by steel mills and by plastic mills, if it can be reduced by recycling, is a positive thing. And of course, the food issue is a very important issue, and it wouldn't be a bad idea for the RCBC to consider mandating to all the kosher caterers in the community that if there's food left over, that they must make sure that it is not thrown out and that is given or recycled to a family or a group or a yeshiva or some institution that could use it. Because this is not only Baltashkis, but this falls into so many other categories. Vasisa hayosha v'atov, mitzvos be'odin lachavera. There are so many things. Unfortunately, we may not see it. We may not see it, but there are, in every community, there are families who don't have what to eat.
So I think that most of the caterers are aware. I know that throughout Bergen County and also here in Essex is different organizations. I forget the name of the pantry that's in Teaneck, where they know that for every function that goes on at every shul, they get in touch and they usually do get that food and repackage it into individual family portions and distribute it.
Well, they definitely should do that.
They do.
There was an organization in Muncie that I used for some of my children's weddings called Shiur HaPlate. And what they do is they send a crew into the catering hall, and as the food is brought back in, they repackage it right away. So it doesn't take any time away from the catering's function. And they also only have automobiles. They don't have trucks because trucks aren't allowed to go on parkways. So that way it gets to the family faster on local streets in the community. And in most cases, this food is on somebody's table, as I say, before you get the Sheva Brachos, which is the way it's a wonderful way system. Teaneck has it, every community has it, and I urge everybody, if you're having a simcha, to make sure you get in touch with these organizations, even if the caterer may not, to make sure that the food doesn't get thrown out and it could benefit some individual or an institution. It's a very important thing, and this fits into the theme of Tu B'Shvat, which is expanded not just, and we'll talk about it tomorrow a little bit more, but the concept of protecting the environment extends in many different halachic areas, and hopefully we can use the resource that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us to benefit as many people as possible. And that's the principle behind recycling. Okay. Any questions, comments? Good. So go out and recycle and help feed a family in need. Have a great day today. Be careful.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Greene. Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Greene.